going to try to come over here a little bit so I can look at that. I was kind of getting tired of looking down at everybody during the presentation. Last night at dinner, we were talking about a couple things. So I decided today, since... Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. There we go. There we go. Got it?
There you go.
All righty. So we were talking about a couple things last night, and I think you knew that they asked me to do 2 talks, and then she asked me to give the same talk twice, and I thought that was kind of redundant. So I decided I was going to change it. And since the theme is obesity, I'm going to cover some very interesting stuff with obesity with you and kind of walk you through why we had this big epidemic. But before we do that, we got in some interesting discussion last night about beta cell failure. And this is what happens. When you have persistent hyperglycemia, you get beta cell dysfunction. And it's very interesting. We call type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but really, are they type 1 and type 2? They're all beta cell dysfunction. Bottom line is when the beta cell doesn't work, it doesn't matter if you want to call it type 1 or type 2. And the nomenclature gets hard because I see patients with type 2 and all of a sudden they go on this, they're type 1. Well, that's not necessarily the case. But the important take-home message here is that we used to think that beta cells died. You poison them, you tox them, you kill them, and they die. They go into apoptosis. Well, that's not the case. They actually de-differentiate. You guys ever heard of de-differentiation? Okay. Well, what de-differentiation is under this phase of persistent hyperglycemia, the beta cell, that insulin cell, that beta cell says, I'm sick and tired of getting poisoned to death. I'm going to de-differentiate. I'm going to stop making insulin. So it becomes a non-endocrine cell. And it just sits there. And it waits and waits and waits until the glucose gets better. If the glucose gets better, it says, okay, I'll make more insulin. But after a while, it gets kind of pissed off. And if it doesn't get its way, it actually re-differentiates into a glucagon cell. Now, is that exactly what you want in a patient with diabetes with a blood sugar of 300? Absolutely not. So this is what, working here? Technology is good when it works.
Yeah. Exactly. You're stuck in differentiation.
I'm de-differentiated. That's right. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Told you too much of my life history last night. Surprised that you can't advance it. So the next couple of slides until I get into what happens is the beta cell is unable to do that. It actually gets blindsided, so it's not able to do that. And so really, just to summarize very briefly until we get into the place, what's the mechanism underlying? De-differentiation, not apoptosis, is the main cause of beta cell failure. And that's why if you put somebody on I have a way, I can cure anybody's blood sugars in 48 hours. I can take anybody's blood sugar 300 and make it 100, 48 hours. How do I do it? They get no food. Okay? You get no food for 2 days, your beta cell starts working again. De-differentiation is prone to converting to non-endocrine cells and then even going to alpha cells and alter mental flexibility. So it is very important. I'm not a tight Nazi on glucose control, but we do have to get a little better glucose control in order to do this. So, and this is just to show you that you have de-differentiation even at blood sugars of 150, 200. You have significant de-differentiation if it's at 500. I just put this in just for you to be aware. This is on the left-hand side of the drugs we have today, on the right-hand side of the drugs we're going to have the next 50 years. I did a webinar on this last Wednesday and discussed a lot of the drugs in the pipeline. But what I want to get to is this what I think is interesting, because kind of the obesity theme has been a real part of the discussion here, and that's medical nutritional therapy and obesity, carbohydrates in, obesity out. And so here's our new technology, okay? We've progressed from 1980, the TVs were huge, and everybody was skinny. Now it's flipped around the other way, okay? Here, 2.5 million years, okay? Now in less than 50 years, we have McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and all that, and that's really driven the thing. I like this one. This one actually came out at the time that we invaded Iraq because we were worried about weapons of mass destruction while we should have been worried about weapons of mass expansion in the United States. And then here's David. He returns to Italy. Okay? Comes back from Italy. Well, who's his proud sponsors? Okay? He's got all these great sponsors that helped him develop a little bit of a bulge there. And then I like this guy here. I beat anorexia. That's true. All right, or here you have the fitness gym, 24-hour, but you got the escalators. I always say when you go to a national meeting, how many people actually use the steps? Not a whole lot. Everybody uses the elevator. This is a patient of mine. I told him to take his dog for a walk, so he did. Okay. He takes his dog for a walk. And actually what he's doing is he's watching I think it was the game between the Broncos and who they play in the Super Bowl. Anyway, so he did exactly what I told him to do. But here's the dilemma. Here's what happened. Look at the obesity curve. It was around 15, 18% until 1980. And all of a sudden, it just took off. So what happened? Why in 1980? I mean, something had to happen. I mean, history's got to say something. And obesity doubled in that time period. So here we have the curve. Here's that curve again for the 1960s. Here's overweight, obese, very obese. 1980. So what happened in 1980 to account for this dramatic increase in obesity? One of the main players, I think, is a guy named Ancel Keys. I don't know how many of you know Ancel Keys. He was a physiologist. He was very fixated on the fact that saturated fat killed you. So you should not eat saturated fat. So that was his theme. And he published this paper in 1971, I believe it was, or 1970, called the 7-Country Study. And what he took 7 countries, and he published and showed unequivocally that dietary saturated fat causes coronary artery disease. Direct link, okay? And he did study some others showing that increased fiber and weight loss for obese patients is beneficial and helps reduce cholesterol. So he was one of the first pioneers at least talking about different types of data. And all this data served importantly for the development of, quote, sound public policy, okay? So in conclusion, a half-century of extensive internal research must be taken into account. This is actually somebody backing up Ancel, saying that, all this work has clearly come to fruition. Well, not sure we can say that. So here was his study. Here's his 7-country study. Upper side cholesterol, dietary fatty acids. Increase the dietary fatty acids in the diet, you increase the serum cholesterol. That's his hypothesis. And if you then look at 10-year mortality, the higher the fat, particularly saturated fat intake, the greater your risk of dying of coronary artery disease. So this was this is 1971, 70. So people are now saying, geez, saturated fats are going to kill us. So the dietary guidelines, these were done by the U.S. Senate. I'm not sure. They supposedly, I heard they brought 3 experts in. Okay? And I don't really know what an expert is, but when we had the old 35 millimeter slides, an expert was defined as anybody more than 35 miles from home. Okay? So I guess if I'm in Dallas, I'm an expert then, because I'm more than 35 miles from home. But they said you must increase the carbohydrate consumption in the diet, you must decrease the saturated fat in the diet, and you must really reduce saturated fat because that's really, really bad for you. Said no more cholesterol, you got to really reduce cholesterol, reduce sugar consumption. Okay, that was another recommendation which really failed miserably. And they said reduce salt because there's this link between salt. And if you look at salt studies, it's very, very debatable. I mean, if you're normal tensive, it probably doesn't matter how much salt you eat. But if you have hypertension and you have your blood pressure meds aren't working, maybe you are salt sensitive and restricting salt, and you might be. But this was George McGovern. I have to put this in because George McGovern, I went to high school in South Dakota, and he was the governor at that time, and he actually ran for president one year. So here's now the new USDA dietary guidelines. Avoid fatty meats and run like hell. Okay? That's the whole idea. All right, so here was the classic diet heart hypothesis that Ancel put together. Increased saturated fat, increased cholesterol, causes plaques, causes narrowing, causes MI. End of story, right? Pretty straightforward. So, 84, they come out and say, oh man, you better not eat those bacon and eggs. I don't know, did you guys have eggs this morning? I did. 2 of them, so did I. And but I didn't have any bacon. But you can see in 1984, that doesn't look very good, Then there were many studies. I only show you this one, but there's at least 4 or 5 studies that have come out in the last, I think this was 2014, in the last 3 or 4 years that clearly showed there was absolutely no link between saturated fat intake and coronary artery disease. Absolutely no link whatsoever. So everybody's kind of stepping back going, in 87, 97. And then the more astounding thing is the new guidelines actually said, maybe we shouldn't do anything about it. Maybe you're right, we shouldn't do saturated fat. And they published that in February of last year, and they retracted it in the beginning of this year. They took it out of the paper. So I'm sure there was some political push to say, man, you can't say that because saturated fat is bad for you. So now they say in 2014, but eat butter, it's okay. Nothing wrong with that. And hell, I'm from Wisconsin originally, and margarine, what the hell was margarine? In the 50s, we had to drive over to, I call it Illinois. Okay? I had to go over there in order to get margarine because you were prohibited to have margarine in the Wisconsin because of the dairy industry. So here's the consequences of that 1977 recommendation. The problem was when they said decrease fat in the diet, people really decreased all fats in the diet, even the healthy fats. So that wasn't a really good choice. We replacing those fats with carbohydrates created three major problems. You decreased unsaturated fats, as I just said. You get excessive weight gain, and I'll show you why you get the excessive weight gain. And then you ultimately get the type 2 diabetes that we're talking about. Interesting, when we talk about insulin resistance, though, it is important to understand that obesity is not included in insulin resistance. In the original description of insulin resistance by Jerry Reven, it did not include obesity. And the reason it didn't is because when I worked with him, we had patients with BMIs of 40 that were not insulin resistant at all. And we had patients with BMIs of 25 that were profoundly insulin resistant. So he did not want to include obesity in the insulin resistant model. It doesn't say, though, that if you are prone to insulin resistance and you gain 50 pounds, it's not good for you. But it's really not a direct association with insulin resistance. So here is the consequences. Here's those recommendations. Yeah, that really worked, didn't it? That was really a resounding successful accomplishment by our government. So what went wrong? Why did this happen? Well, here's the revised hypothesis. And this is really the best one. You increase carbs, you increase cholesterol, you reduce unsaturated fats, which you want, you increase oxidized LDL. Doing that causes the cascade that we talked about. So it's not the saturated fat that does it. So here's that 6 studies. He actually had 6 studies. He put a 7th one in. But here's Key's saturated fat line. Okay? Man, it looks pretty good correlation there. You'd say, man, there is an association. However, there were actually 22 countries he studied. 22 countries. But he only reported 7. So the question is, why did he only report 7? And you can sit on either side of the fence you want. They say he was a great scientist and he would never do anything like this. And other people would say, well, wait a minute, the data's... And now it's interesting. You can't say it's Springer's line, okay? He actually drew a line that said high saturated fat's actually good for you. The high saturated fat diet is actually will reduce your risk of heart disease. And here's all 22 studies together. That correlation doesn't look very good, does it? So you can massage the science as you want to, and that's an unfortunate thing. But it had a profound impact on the whole industry. And it still has a profound impact. So key question, why did Ansel Keys only report on 6 countries? Why did he do that? Nobody will know. So I guess maybe you go where he goes and ask him when you get there. But here's 4 countries. There's one that's a kind of debate right now. But these are ones that have the lowest risk of heart disease in the world. Look at their saturated fat intake, 66%, 75%, 63%, 60%. How many of us would think that eating 60% saturated fat would be good for you? Well, they don't have any heart disease. But they're probably not obese and they exercise and control their calories. So, 61, 84, wrong. 2004, butter, yes. We're good to go. Now here's we were talking about this last night. Somebody actually has a t-shirt, Ansel Keys, destroying good health with bogus science since 1953. And some people feel very strongly about that. I'll give him credit though. Okay, and a lot of people might not know this, but the K rations, remember the K rations for the military? He was the one that designed them. He actually came up with the K rations. And why I love it is because if you look at it, it says breakfast, dinner, supper. Remember it used to be breakfast, lunch, dinner, but I guess in those days it was dinner and supper. So again, just a little bit of history for you. So here's one of the challenges, dietary fructose. In the past, we had 5 to 10% of our fruits and that had fructose in it. And people worried about fructose being bad for you. But the incredible thing is from 1975 to 1985, there was a huge increase in high fructose corn syrup. From 1% to almost 35%. Now, what would do that? You can think of why would all of a sudden would high fructose corn syrup surge and sucrose consumption decreased? I actually think here's the curve. Okay, here's high fructose corn syrup, 1975. It's up to 40% in 2005. Sucrose is dropping. The other important thing people forget to look at is the total consumption of sugars has gone up. Okay, well that's the calories that's driving this whole issue. But then you look at that and say, well, why? What happened then? Well, have you ever heard of Earl Butz? He was the Secretary of Agriculture, and he was under the Richard Nixon. And Nixon was having trouble because the war wasn't going well. The Vietnam War wasn't going well. He was in risk of losing his election. So he went and said, I got to find something to do. And one of the problems was food was getting very expensive. And so he said, well, if I can get food to be cheaper, I'll get reelected. And that's what he did. So he hired this guy, and Butz came in and said, they used to say, don't grow corn. We'll give you money not to grow corn. But Butz said, nope, get big or get the hell out. So they just started massively producing corn. Corn and corn and corn and corn. And everything, the cattle were fatter, the burgers got bigger, the fries were fried in oil. I mean, there was just everything. Then all of a sudden we had this surplus of corn, and we didn't know what to do with it. So Butz went to Japan. And Japan was actually the first to really perfect the high fructose corn syrup concept. They were able to actually perfect it. There was actually a U.S. group that did it in the 1950s, but the only problem was what they used to convert it was cyanide. So, most people wouldn't probably be too tuned to using that. But so he came up with the idea of the high fructose corn syrup. So high fructose corn syrup was pumped into everything. You name it. It was pumped into it. Cakes, everything. And the other thing is it gave the half-life of this stuff like 30 days, where it used to be like 2 or 3 days. Now you got 30 days. You get that humongous cake. You can sit there for 30 days and nibble on it. So you got things like this, all these high fructose corn syrup. You got all these drinks, high fructose corn syrup. Just look at them. They're high fructose corn syrup. A lot of them get clever now. They just say, a fructose. They kind of say, or added sugar. They somehow avoid putting in the real thing. Now here's a cute one. How'd the diet go? Not good. I had eggs for breakfast. Okay. Scrambled? No. Cadbury's. Okay. So she had 2 Cadbury's, and look at the calories, 170 for each one of them. So that's a lot of eggs. A lot of eggs. So here's the conversion of how high fructose corn syrup got perfected by the Japanese. And we won't go through it, but it's a very classic thing. And it's kind of misnomer because it says high fructose corn syrup. Well, it's only like 42%. So why is it considered high fructose corn syrup? Because the corn itself doesn't have any fructose. So any fructose in the corn is high fructose. And so that's kind of the misnomer people have to understand. I thought they just added more to it, but it's just simply how much they convert. So here's what happened in 1980. Calorie consumption in the U.S. increased by 425 calories. 425 calories. Why did that happen? Why was that? Okay. Starting to see the picture now, why we got this big obesity? So thank heaven, here's 7-Eleven. Remember old 7-Eleven? It was started in 1964. In 1970, it was really struggling. It was having trouble making ends meet, even with its own to-do coffee type of thing. So Coke actually approached them and said, we got these big-sized cups, these 32-ounce cups. Would you like to try them? They said, hell no, we don't want to try those. We got 12 and 20-ounce cups. We don't need any 32-ounce cups. So they said, okay, you can have them. We don't want to do anything. And then 7-Eleven said, well, maybe there's a place in Orange County that really their highest consumption of liquids. Let's put those cups in there, and we'll only charge them 39 cents with no deposit. And the 8-ounce was 50 cents with a deposit. So now all of a sudden you can get it for 39 cents for 32 ounces instead of 8 ounces. Oh, it doesn't take long to do the math. Those cups sold out like in a nanosecond. So, of course, they had this big cup now, and they had to come up with some name. So what name did they come up with? The Big Gulp. And now you even have the Team Gulp, okay? And the Double Gulp. And then I guess 1.5 gulp or 2 gulp, whatever. It's just unbelievable. And the thing is, you can go in and just push the button and do it. So it doesn't take the cashier much time. That was the problem in the past. He'd have to make all these drinks, and the lines would be like Starbucks. And people got tired of that, so they said, okay, we'll just create it that way. Now, here's what's interesting, is you take the original Coke, 1886. Cane sugar, inverted cane sugar. Okay, 1995. Remember the new Coke? Remember when that came out, everybody goes, ah, Jesus, that is awful. Well, what it really was a mixture of sugar cane and high fructose corn syrup. And if you do mix those two together, it tastes pretty crappy. A lot of people think Coke did this unintentionally. They wanted to go to they had to change their Coke. They had to change it, and I'll show you in a minute why they had to change it. But the question was, why did they do this? Because they wanted you to get this ugly taste in your mouth. And then they said, we're going to go back to the original Coke, okay? Well, the original Coke is high fructose corn syrup. So it's not the original. But if you take the sugar cane, then make a mixture, it tastes like crap, then you get the high fructose corn syrup, which tastes pretty good, you think you're getting back the same thing that you did before, and you're happy. So here we are again at this picture that I showed you previously. But the question is, in 1975, it was only, was introduced to the United States. Why was high fructose corn syrup introduced to the United States? What was the reason for this? How many of you have heard of Hurricane Allen? Probably none of you. Hurricane Allen was a Category 5 storm, and you can see all the little pinkies went all the way across, all the way across the Caribbean at Category 5. It literally obliterated the sugar cane, just wiped it off the map. So all of a sudden, everybody's in a scramble. Where am I going to get my source of sugar so I can sweeten up all my drinks? And that's what happened. So carbohydrates in, obesity out. The nutritional recommendations dramatically increase consumption of carbohydrates and recommended reduce saturated fats, which was a disaster. The introduction of high fructose corn syrup was clearly needed for an alternative to sugar cane. Hurricane Allen got in the way, and the net effect was we have this amazing issue with obesity. And so here it is, the denial must end. And our congressmen are saying, what? Obesity epidemic? What are you talking about? Here's our friend Dr. Phil. You're fat. Don't try and sugarcoat it because you'll eat that too. Okay? Here's a couple pigeons. You got to start eating at a different parking lot. Okay? He's got to get out of the McDonald's parking lot. It's not doing him any good. You can change your eating utensils. I provide these to my patients when interested. They don't last very long. Here, clearly the best thing is the Mediterranean diet. No question. Mediterranean diet. The healthiest diet. But there's also, when you combine the DASH with the Mediterranean diet, I actually think that there are some complements of each other. So somebody's come up with this term, Mediterranean diet, which I think is pretty good. But then you have the pizza diet. It's pretty close to the pyramid, isn't it? Right. It looks pretty good. Okay, well here's my diet, the Lardinois diet, the pizza. You got the pizza, but hey man, you got to have some beer and some wings to go with that as well. Come on. And then of course, since I'm in Texas, you got to have the Texas diet. I had to put this one in just for this talk here. You get steak and Bluebell. I didn't even know what Bluebell was until I looked it up, and it's a famous ice cream. But when I Googled it, I guess they had some Neisseria, but some Listeria type of infection or something, and so I think their products kind of crashed pretty big. So the bottom line that ultimately it drives this, and this is the last part of the editorial that I wrote, is the bathroom scale. Okay, help, wow, diet. The bathroom scale in the end is the final arbitrator. It's unbiased, totally objective, cold, calculated, and even cruel. Okay, but it doesn't lie. It doesn't lie. Okay? So, and then you have what we call the donkey diet. Okay, you know what that is? Donkey diet. To lose weight, keep your ass out of the refrigerator. All right. So this is my closing remarks. I've stayed on time pretty good despite the... obesity remains a serious healthcare concern, no question. The government, Mother Nature, and all that got in the way. We have to really revise the way that we do this. I liked your idea about, no sweets in the home and stuff like that, because, man, if they're there, they're going to consume them. And then the bathroom scale is the final arbitrator. So that's it.
Very powerful presentation. Very interesting also. I think the obesity problem, effectively, agroalimentary industry have a big part in it. Our politicians definitively make error. And effectively, the food guide beginning a joke every year when you see the food guide changing every year and people say, what does scientific know about food? And you're probably right. Just to mention about Mediterranean diet, I'm teaching obesity and nutrition myself. What we realize in the world in general, moderation is still the key for everything you do when you eat. And I will say the Mediterranean diet is always put up, but Japanese have a fantastic diet also, and it's not Mediterranean. They don't have olive oil. They're based more majorly on fish and rice. and they live the most longer people in the world. So every place you can find people with a long longevity. They could be in India, it could be in any country. But every time they eat moderately and with all the ingredients, you have a good diet. I will not say that the best diet in the world is Mediterranean or the French cooking. I will just say that every cooking is good and by moderation. That's that. But I'm open for questions.
Right, and I would actually, I reiterate what he said, it's really not the diet, it's the calorie consumption. So you find a diet that's palatable for your patient that restricts calories. It doesn't matter what they eat, it's just the number of calories. All this stuff about, well, if you eat high carb, low fat, that's better for you than, and every study's shown is if the calories are the same, it doesn't matter what you do. Questions? Yes.
It's not a question, it's kind of comment and observation. First of all, in my clinic, I recommend, everyone asks me, what should I eat? I say, you can eat whatever you want, but don't eat a lot. Okay?
Don't eat.
Don't eat a lot.
A lot.
For example, a dessert for a family, you don't have to eat it, you just have to test it. And the second thing, I have observed in my voyages and in meetings that we go, it's the way you eat that says what is your personality. I mean, you go to the ADA now, or you go to big meetings, and you know that the people that are attending the meeting are the people who talk about obesity and food. And look how they eat. They don't eat, they devour, because there is a sense of hysteria when they get to meat. Sometimes when you go to other places, for example in India, okay? And I have noticed it many times. They put a leaf, a banana leaf, and they eat slowly. There is not this sense of devouring. It's an attack on the food. And this will tell you this person is very aggressive versus himself. So it must tell you there is something there that is not only the food, it's the aggressiveness and the tension that makes the difference.
I should have, there's one slide I actually could have put in here that's interesting. There's actually a thing that's made in Germany, it's called the happy fork, okay? And literally, if you start eating too fast, it starts vibrating. It tells you, slow down, slow down, slow down. Very interesting device.
And the quantity, I
Yeah.
mean, in
No,
States, I don't have to tell you. You increase
Yeah.
the quantity, your brain is completely, works differently when you look at this thing or you look at this thing. So it makes it reflects something, it signals something else. So it's not only the food, it's the
Right. Oh, yeah.
tension
I'm
and the
agreeing. It's a
hysteria.
complex system.
It's a complex
It's a complex
Yes, you have a
system.
question?
No, just I have a comment on the same thing about that. The thing is that we have forgotten our tradition. We on the name of civilization, we have forgotten our scriptures, our norms, our culture. We talk about like in Ayurveda, they talk about the treatment of diseases by how moderating the food consumption. I mean, the diabetes has been there from, you were telling about the 2nd century, has been there in the time of pre-Vedic periods, like 5,000 years ago or before that. And they have been successful in treating that with the moderation of that. And when you talk about different scriptures, they say that you should finish your food just before you feel that you are satiated. That level of unsatiety should be there, but we don't practice. I want to tell you that on the name of civilization, McDonald's, KFC, or different parts of the world, whatever the food, as you have been saying that, we are forgetting our root from where we all belong to. And that's why these all metabolic diseases, metabolic syndromes have been growing up.
Absolutely.
And instead of just abolishing McDonald's, they should abolish big fish. I mean, this is the first thing to do.
Fast food beginning to enter that, and they're beginning to make small portions.
They
They have an
should
entire
enter
economic
low.
clip because they said, okay, I have a small portion, my portion is healthy, and I make more profit. So in this sense, yes, the economy profit will help them, but now fast food are attacked on that for the large portion, and they have a movement now to decrease their portion.
Any other questions?
Make a comment.
Would you like the microphone?
Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
As you were speaking, it made me think of super freakonomics. I think you should write a book on some of the commentaries you made. It was just it would make a very good read.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of like, I've enjoyed history. I hate history in high school because my history teacher, all you want to do is know the dates.
Yeah.
It's totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
So now I go back and it's fun to look at the history because look at things like, I mean, like even Trousseau, you know, the Trousseau sign. Okay, there's actually a Trousseau phenomenon too associated with malignancy.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Trousseau actually diagnosed himself with the Trousseau phenomenon and died of pancreatic cancer 1 year later. So that's pretty.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I was always wondering what happens to the soma in Japan. Does any
Oh, you mean the
sumo wrestlers?
The sumo
Yes.
wrestlers?
Sumo wrestlers, oh, we actually
Yeah.
studied some of them at Stanford.
What-
Oh, they're phenomenal. I mean, these guys are 400 pounds.
Yes.
Okay, but they can fling you,
Yeah, I know,
from here
but what
to
happens in
New
the blood?
Orleans.
What's about the lipids and?
Oh, they're perfectly normal
Okay, so
while
this is
they are
normal.
exercising, but as soon as they stop their
Exactly.
sumo wrestling,
Exactly.
their diabetes flourishes.
Immediately they stop exercise,
Just
they have
boom.
problem.
And you have shown something else. You have shown that the calorie consumption rose by 460.
Yep.
Do you think 460, if I will eat 460 more calories, I will be much bigger?
Yeah, 460 a day, yeah, you're gonna explode. And you
Oh,
look at
yes.
it, you take the 8 ounce, what was it? Was that-
You
No,
think
I
so?
said I agree with you, it's
Yeah.
enough.
You take the 8 ounce
enough?
Coke,
No,
that's
it's
51
too
cents.
It's too much?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
well, how much do we need a day? Just
Well, no,
okay.
we were just saying, no,
No.
in 1980, the obesity rate was like 18%.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, we increased the caloric intake of everybody in the United States by 462
And
calories.
this is enough to make a
No, but a
Oh,
woman,
sure.
it's an
Okay.
average, okay? A woman of 5'5" would consider 1,800 calories. But it depends on every individual. But normally, you don't suppose every individual in the past know what to eat naturally. And that's depending your side. My side, I eat less calorie probably than him. He's more higher than me. So everybody have a variability. The problem is the food restoration came with very over calorie.
Because it seems to me
Right, no,
not enough
no,
to-
there's no question that you increase calories by 462 calories a day. I mean, if you believe the 3,500 calorie rule, if that's really valid, that's a pound, almost a pound a week.
I'm agree with him on that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and what happened was, it was just simply because of cost.
Yeah.
39 cents for a 32 ounce big gulp
Yeah.
versus 50 cents with a deposit for an 8 ounce bottle of Coke that they used to sell or that.